So you wanna be a picture book writer, then you gotta write picture books. And you're gonna need a bucket load of bright ideas for titles, plots, and hooks. If you're partial to prose or you're raring to rhyme, then repeat after me. It's a challenge, but I'm gonna tackle each story 1 month at a time with 12 by 12.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the 12 by 12 Picture Book Podcast. I'm published picture book author Julie Headland. I'm also the founder of the 12 by 12 Picture Book Challenge. And I'm delighted to be here today with Davey, who is a children's author. And she came to the podcast via a donation for publishing for Minnesota. So first and foremost, I wanted to thank you both for that contribution and also for your interest in being on the podcast, which is great. And one thing that one thing that's really interesting about your path, and I think will be fascinating for listeners and 12 other 12 by 12 members, is that you have a couple of self-published books, and 12 by 12 focuses more a lot. Well, 12 by 12 is mostly about traditional publishing. Most of the members are either traditionally published or seeking agents or looking to be traditionally published. But we do have some authors who have successfully self-published. And with the kind of recent publishing news with, some of the big publishing houses closing imprints and laying off editors and so on, even within 12 by 12, our Facebook group, there's been more conversation now around self-publishing. So I'm just going to first give you the opportunity to introduce yourself, tell us more about yourself and your work, and then maybe just give us a little glimpse into your journey as a self-published picture book author.
As you mentioned, my name is Davey, and I write picture books that are very much about multicultural communities that are based on ones that I've lived in myself because I've about 20 years as a ELL teacher and also have worked with the refugee population in various capacities. So I really wanted to create a book that kind of celebrated that community. And I wanted to do it now. I didn't want to have to kind of necessarily wait. So I found a place called DVO Studios that was willing to publish my book. I first had it edited on Reedsy, got the illustrations done through DVO Studios. They sent the illustrations back and forth with me. So I was able to see like, oh, this is what I want. And then from there, they gave me marketing material. They published the book, gave me marketing materials, and I was pretty much set to go from there. And after the book came out, I did some library visits, I did some school visits, and I also did a lot of vendor fairs.
When did these books come out?
So one came out last year in 2025, and the other one came out in 2024. So Walk in Town was 2024, and then the Holiday Stroll was 2025.
Okay. So these both have an illustrator
Mhm.
named here. But if I'm looking at the correct DVO Studios, is it generating through AI or did you have?
No, it's generated through individual illustrators that they hire.
Okay.
So I was able to pick the style that I want, and then they came back with to me with individual drawn pictures
Okay.
of the characters, and then I approved those and sent them also pictures based on places in the communities and even people in my life. So that
Good.
was actually really special.
Yeah. Yeah, because one of the things as an organization for creators, supporting
Mhm.
creators, is when we approach the subject of the topic of self-publishing is we definitely don't want people going to AI for illustrations just because, I mean, for all the obvious reasons. Um, but mainly, first of all, it's stealing from existing
Mhm.
artists, and also we want to support human-made art. So I'm glad to hear that.
My sister-in-law is actually a Emmy Award-winning cartoonist, and she pointed me in the direction and has always been like,
Good.
just stay away from AI. They're kind of taking from us. And
That's right.
so I
Yeah.
was like, okay.
Yeah, I'm
And
actually really glad this came up early on in the conversation, because let's just say that up front, that if you're considering self-publishing, you need to find a way to source illustrations from illustrators and have it be
Mhm.
made by humans. Don't cut costs using AI. It's unethical. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Agreed.
Yeah, I'll stand down off my soapbox now. So you said that you wanted to self-publish. Did you know that right away? So you didn't try to submit them traditionally, or?
Submitted it to like one or two places, but I didn't have a strong drive to submit. Like to because I just knew that I wanted this story out, especially with the way the world is right now. I was like, let's just create something that like just really celebrates what I see every day. I was gonna say I did take a class on Grub Street, and the woman really helped me find where my voice was in that conversation. And I wasn't necessarily, I was kind of a little worried that my voice could be kind of overlooked as being about multicultural literature when, like, on surface, it doesn't seem like I know much about multicultural. So I was like, I just want to have that voice out there and not necessarily need to defend it. And yeah.
Right. So part of that is, I'm assuming you mean the conversations around own voices and lived experience,
Yeah,
that typically traditional publishers, I think rightly so, are looking for people
Lily.
from within those communities to tell their stories. Your books seem to cover a variety of, it's sort of just an exposure to a variety of cultures, like you would see in a city neighborhood or
Hmm.
whatnot. And
Absolutely.
that's your experience. And you said you've done some work with refugees. So tell us a little bit about that.
So my husband and I have actually fostered refugees, and for long periods of time. And then, as I said, I was an ELL teacher. I was in charge of a Haitian program at my local college, and so I've done a lot of that work. And my husband himself has gone done work with Cambodians, so often shares with me about the work he's done as well. So for me, that work has been such a big part of my life.
Mhm. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't say that we need fewer books that talk about acceptance and inclusion and exposure to different people and different cultures. And also the urban experience, although it's getting a little bit better, but the urban experience tends to be less, there are fewer books that kind of celebrate that life versus more rural, suburbia kind of experiences. If you don't mind me asking, let's talk a little bit about the financing, because one thing that I always caution anyone considering self-publishing is, obviously you have to then pay for everything yourself. You're paying for the editing, you're paying for the illustrations, you're paying for, book design and printing and all shipping, all of that, right? And so how did you approach that aspect of it?
The first book was funded in part from money I inherited. I didn't have a lot of inheritance, but my father was a very big influence in my writing growing up.
Mhm.
Even though he was dyslexic, he'd spend hours reading my stories and like really helping with word of the day calendars. And I'd see him every other weekend, and he'd always have the 14 ones out. So when he passed away, he said to me, I want you to publish a book.
Oh,
We've talked about this forever. So I published the book, And that's why the front it says, "To my dad, we did it." And then the second book, I was working at a high school and I had some money that was like accumulated that way.
Mm,
And so that's been how I did it. Yeah.
yeah. And so were you looking or are you looking to just get these books out there, or are you hoping that you will actually recoup your investment? And is that one of your goals?
My goal is to recoup the investment. I would love for more people to read it. And I think I've made up the cost of the first book
Oh,
by going to a lot of vendor events.
mm,
Like there was one week around Christmas time when I think around Christmas time I did 15 between Christmas and between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So I was able to like just kind of pull it in that way. And so I've been doing it that way. I kind of wanted a little bit like more exposure in a way because in my area I'm kind of known, but outside of my area I don't have much of a following. When I recently went to an event at my local library, the librarian was like, "Oh yeah, I know your book," and other people were like, "Oh yeah, you're that one with that book." But like outside of that, I don't have, I would love people to see it more and more, so that kids everywhere can be able to step outside their comfort zone, and not just step outside their comfort zone, but have their comfort zone expanded so that it's not uncomfortable. And then the other thing is for kids who are from diverse communities to feel seen. So my goal is to spread my message, and recouping is a great way to keep it going, but the message is the most important part.
so would you say that you are going to wait until you recoup the full investment and then attempt to publish another book, or is this something that you're going to continue doing?
I have two work in progresses. And one is I'm hoping to traditionally publish because I feel like it's a book it's very specific to grief. And I feel like the right publishing house and can do a lot with it more than I could to the general public. And then I do plan on self-publishing another book, which is in some ways similar to the book that my books that you have there, but different at the same time. And in the sense that they are middle grade, but they're based in diverse mill towns.
So, and I don't know if we said this, but for people listening, the two books are The Holiday Stroll, illustrated by I said Diana because I'm going to Italy and I have a friend. My one of my very good friends is Diana, but I'm sure she pronounces her name Diana. Um, and A Walk in Town, also illustrated by Diana Florescu. And I think this is really important for authors, no matter what path you take in publishing, that each book is different. And I really liked how you said that you have a book that you want to possibly pursue traditional publishing because you can see the advantages that that might bring to this book versus some other books that have more potential to do well in self-publishing. And I think this is a conversation that creators are going to have with themselves more, even if you're traditionally published and you're thinking maybe you're going to self-publish a passion project or a book that you don't think would get picked up by a traditional publisher, or for folks who have started with self-publishing and then want to move into traditional publishing because it is kind of different. It's a different market in terms of what traditional publishers look for. I also think it's interesting that you seem like you had very clear goals for these books. And I think that's hugely important for self-published authors. I see a lot of talk sometimes of people who want to self-publish as a way of getting their books traditionally published ultimately. And that doesn't sound like that's what you were up to here.
I was not really into just like, I can't get it published, I'll get it published. It was just
You're gonna,
about,
right,
yeah.
right. So, what advice would you give to listeners out there who may be considering self-publishing, or maybe they're in the throes of it already?
I would say really look at your options of where you look at certain things. Like I see a lot of self-published people who sometimes took an easier path or did something a certain way without really looking at what other options they had. Like even when it comes down to like something as simple as paper,
Yeah.
like to really know what those things are and then go from there. I would also say find ways to save money if you can, because it is a process that I think people can go through and learn a lot. I feel like if I were
Hmm.
to traditionally publish now, I would know what's going on at each step. And I think that that's been really eye-opening.
Yeah. So before we started recording, for just for the benefit of our listeners, I mentioned to Debbie that she has nice quality paper, thick paper in these books. And this one is also a hardcover. And this one's paperback, but it's not again, the thickness of the cover is more than sometimes you see very flimsy paperback covers. So, and I mean, I get it, right? Because everything that you spend is coming from you. So
Mhm.
it can be tempting to cut corners, but really be careful about which of those corners you're going to cut, right? Because ultimately, there's
Exactly.
our kids on the other end of these books, and
Mhm.
we want to have them to have the
And to
best
compete
ones.
and to compete with other books, yours kind of has to be of a certain quality.
Hmm.
And I have a lot of people who go to vendor fairs and they always stop and like, wow, this is a really good quality book. And I'm just glad that I invested that into it. And so yeah.
What has your experience been, if any, with getting your book into bookstores?
So there is a craft store near where I live, an artisan market, and I have not only been able to get my book into that place, but I actually have a whole table and I do events there. So I've been able to do that. Also, there's a local um store, bookstore, children's bookstore that where they've taken in my book and I will say sales there are slow except for Christmas time, they do pick up.
Mm,
And then I've gotten into lots of libraries. I don't know if my area is very different than some areas because I live in Massachusetts and I live just north of Worcester, which is about an hour west of Boston. And there seems to be a very big literary hub. We had a
mm,
symposium recently at the library. It was the first annual one, and there were like 30 people there. So I think the libraries here are much more open to things, where I think that there's not been some of the like kind of rejection of libraries here, where it's much more of a become more of a community space.
mm. Yeah.
So,
One thing that struck me as you were talking about your experience is that, your books are about community, and then you're really like pulling in your community as a way of supporting you in the book, which makes a whole lot of sense. And there's a lot of synergy there. For distribution, tell me about it, because I don't want to prompt you because you're the expert and I may just even ask the wrong questions.
So I think one of the things that with distribution is have it done through Ingram Sparks, and then I order some and then sell them at the vendor fairs, or they are on Amazon, though I usually try to divert people to bookshop.org. And
Okay.
the local store I use is the Little B. And so I always want to make sure they have money. I'm like, oh, good. And
Right.
then I think those have been the biggest distributors for me.
I'm glad you mentioned Bookshop because for those of you who are maybe unfamiliar with it, it's a great alternative to Amazon. It's essentially online books. You know, you can buy all the books and you can choose a bookstore that you want to support or something like, say, the 12 by 12 bookshop. We have our own page on Bookshop, and what happens is that any books that are purchased there, the bookstore or organization that you're supporting gets a small commission, and then part of that purchase goes into a pool of all the independent bookstores who operate with Bookshop, and then they get a big check every year, and it helps support independent bookstores. So it's always best to buy from your local indie, but barring that, bookshop.org is a great alternative to Amazon. Even though all authors, regardless of how you've published, we have to coexist with Amazon because they're just too big of a market not to. But bookshop.org is a great alternative. And you gave me the idea that I can create a list on our bookshop, which is bookshop.org/shop dash 12 by 12. I can't remember. We'll put it in the show notes, but I'll create a list of podcast guests' books. So if you're listening and you're interested in, now that I know that your books are on Bookshop, I'll go ahead and put them in there for anybody who's listening would be interested. What research did you do ahead of time? Do you have any resources that you would advise for people?
I think one of the things that I did do that wasn't so much research was I joined Women in Publishing, and I just took a bunch of those courses that help you write, help you know how to do it, how to do a launch party, how to do all these things. And it was so helpful. And I also did things with going to self-publishing workshops at SCBWI New England conferences.
Mhm.
So I take all the conference courses that I absolutely can. So I think that that was one of the biggest help for me. I'm more of these one of these people that doesn't learn by necessarily reading dense things, and I struggle with ADHD and remembering long things. And so for me being in the experience, I was like, okay, I got this.
Yeah. Again, I just have to say I'm impressed with your approach because another thing that I see often with respect to self-publishing is, I want people to realize that if you're doing it right, if you're doing it well, it's not a shortcut to getting published. There's still a lot to learn. And it sounds like you took it all so seriously with respect to craft and learning how to publish a quality book and taking the seminars. And all of that is both time and money that you put in up front to get your book out there in a way that would make it a good book and competitive with other books on the market, regardless of how they were published. And I think sometimes we're tempted to think, oh, I can't find somebody to publish this book. I'm just going to self-publish it. And I'm sure that you kind of cringe when you hear that too.
Sometimes I feel like some people are like, oh, it's self-pub, but like some people are like, I'm not going to find somebody, but then also people on the other side of the equation think, oh, they self-published. They couldn't find anybody to publish it. So when people like do that, it kind of brings down the general quality overall of what to expect from self-published books. I would say if someone's struggling to find someone to publish their book, don't don't give up. It only takes one yes to really get you somewhere. And also, though, if you do self-publish, make sure it's the best work that you can provide. Always go back. Always, look at things. I was actually just working on one of my works in progress, and I was like, this sounds so great. But I just went back and I started looking at the to be verbs, and I was like, oh, I got to fix that. oh, I gotta fix that. Like even small things like that, it could be something as small as the language wordiness.
Yeah.
So don't give up. Just kind of reevaluate, leave, come back.
Right.
So,
And, take feedback on board, right? Like, even if you get a rejection, sometimes that there's good information in that rejection,
mhm,
and it's worth taking that into consideration. Having critique partners and getting feedback from, like you said, you had an editor and all of those things to make your work the strongest that it can be. What I hope is that, I mean, I agree with you that it's far less now than I think it used to be, but there is still a stigma around self-publishing as, oh, you couldn't get anyone to publish your book. But what I'm hoping is that as a result, things are getting tougher in traditional publishing, and that if people are going to take this route, that we'll get more high quality things out there so that that isn't an automatic assumption, right? Because
absolutely.
it would be great if it felt to everybody like it was a viable option. Because I think if publishers had to think, oh boy, self-published books, these books coming out are really great. Maybe we need to open up our minds a little bit more to these kinds of books or
Mhm,
that, right? Like it's sort of the theory that a rising tide lifts all boats kind of thing, right?
mhm. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think it's just, yeah, the better the quality, the better the assumption. And it's just, yeah. So I think that it's really, we want the best books out there that
Right.
possible, whether it's traditional or self-publication.
Right, right. So you said as we were talking, you let me know that you have a new website. Just tell us about that because now you're moving into doing some teaching.
I mostly work with kids on the writing portion. So, besides a bachelor's in creative writing from Eastern Oregon University, which is a small school, but for its size, it has a big bang when it comes to creative writing. I also got a master's in elementary education. So, I go on to a website called OutSchool, and I
Mm-hmm.
teach kids about creative writing in many different ways. I also teach academic writing. And it's really how I've been able to make my whole life about being an author. And so it's been able to, and I've actually hired teachers on, and that's primarily what I do. And then the writing books is kind of like just being like celebrating what I do.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so,
I love that because I think all of us in this business know it's pretty hard to make a living just from writing books.
absolutely.
But it is, I can say from my own experience, it's such a blessing to be able to earn a living in publishing adjacent or book writing adjacent things like I do with 12 by 12 and other initiatives. So even when I'm not writing or even if I don't have a book coming out, I'm always in the writing
Mhm.
and picture book space, which is just a wonderful way to spend every day, And we have a lot of teachers in 12 by 12, and I'm sure we have teacher author listeners. So we'll have the link to your website in the show notes as well. I wanted to tell you that one of the things you said about your father, that you used part of your inheritance and that
Mhm.
you he was such an influence on your life. It always amazes me when these correlations come up when I have conversations with people that, you've never even met. But I don't think anybody knows this. But my father, when he passed away, a few years later was when I started 12 by 12. And he was a lawyer, but he owned his own practice and was very entrepreneurial. And so when I started 12 by 12, I used some money from my inheritance. And I was thinking this would be something I know my dad would be proud of. And I gave myself a year and let me just see how this works. And here we are, like 15 years later. So yeah, that's a very, heartfelt connection that I have with your
Yeah.
purpose. Yeah.
And it's great to hear about like your father as well, because I'm like, go dads
Right.
that inspire their daughters.
Right. And honestly, I came from the banking industry, so I never really thought I would be like running my own business, and that was the thing that enabled me to do it and made the difference. So, okay, looping back around here, I'm really excited for you. I congratulate you on your books. I thank you again for your interest in being on the podcast and sharing your experience with self-publishing. And as you probably know, one of the questions I like to ask all of our guests is, what book do you wish you had written and why?
So I was thinking over this question, and for me, it reminds me of there was an actor who said that they wished they'd been in the movie Ghost.
Mm,
And as much as that actor's actually my favorite actor, it just wouldn't be the same.
mm,
And I feel like any book like by a different author wouldn't quite be the same. However, taking that aside, I would say one of my favorite books that I think that I'd love to be able to have written in some way is Grandpa Green. I
oh,
love the beauty of like the pictures, and so I feel like, that was just gorgeous the way they did it. Another thing I would love to be able to do. So I'm from the same city as Dr. Seuss.
mm,
And Dr. Seuss's books have kind of gotten older and not as modern. And I really wish that I could take those books in some ways and modernize them. And
mm.
so yeah, I'm like kind
Wow,
of my
that's a
homeboy.
great idea. I mean, I don't think the Seuss estate would let anybody touch that with a
Never.
10-foot pole, but you're right, you know? Listen, years ago, I had the idea because I love the song, the Billy Joel song, We Didn't Start the Fire, but it was dated even when it came out, right? Like when it came out, my dad and my mom were telling me what some of the references were,
Yeah.
'cause I was born in 1971, so I didn't really have any awareness of the Vietnam War, for example, and Agent Orange and all the stuff that was referenced. And so for years, I thought, I want to do an update to that. And after a while, I just did for fun. Like every time I got stuck in my writing, I would go in there. And now, of course, it's probably been, I mean, Obama was president when I wrote it, because I remember having Obama in there. So now even that would be dated, but it was a great exercise. And I always thought, in the back of my mind, well, maybe, Billy Joel, maybe, who knows, And
Yeah.
then wouldn't like last year, somebody came out with an updated version of it and it was on the radio and I was, but anyway, so I guess you never know, but I think all writing is worth doing and it could inspire you, it could lead you somewhere else. So yeah, I love that idea.
And it's funny how you bring up Billy Joel, just because I'm a huge Billy Joel fan. I always tell my husband's from Long Island, and so I even tell him, I'm like, it's like, I don't know, you weren't my first Long Island love.
Right?
Yeah.
Billy Joel's pretty big in that neck of the
Yeah.
woods for sure.
Yes.
Well, thank you again so much for being here. And for those of you listening, we appreciate you. Please be sure to like and review and comment and share from wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you're not already on the 12 by 12 mailing list, you can go to 12by12challenge.com/newsletter. And that's where you'll get all the goodies, all the free resources, more information with the show notes on the podcast, and so on. So we really hope you join us there. And we'll see you next time. Ciao for
Thank
now.
you very much.
Do it together so never you fear. It's a handy little way to help you kick into gear. You're amazing, exciting, look out! as you're writing. 12 by 12. 12 manuscripts. 12